The alarm stuttered across the council station at 1427 Galactic Standard, a chirp reserved for dead stars and dead treaties. Ambassador Sareth lifted his gaze from the morning dispatches and watched as every status wall went black. No radio hiss, no laser lattice, no entangled pings. The human sphere had fallen utterly, impossibly quiet. "Define quiet," he said, though the answer was etched on the faces of everyone on the floor. "Total phase silence," replied his aide, purple hands shaking. "No sublight traffic, no quantum chatter. Their networks read present but mute. Even the little noise, memes, sports scores, arguments about breakfast, that's all gone." Sareth had served 3 centuries. He had learned the shape of famine, of machine plague, of comet winters that erased alphabets. He had also learned a truth older than the station's bones. Humans were many things, but never quiet. Silence from them was not absence. It was the raised hammer. Emergency holocircles bloomed alive with representatives. Crystal bodies sang worry in ultraviolet. Iron shell strategists gave nothing, which meant everything. The hive speaker clicked as if afraid of attracting hunters. The agenda was a single line: humanity, status anomalous. They traded facts in quick cuts. Psychic arrays reported a void where 20 billion loud minds had been. Network watchers confirmed. Processors spun, grids held, but no content moved. Patrols sent toward the border failed to report. One courier's last scream contained only the words, "We're not alone," in their quiet. "What does it mean?" asked the mineral envoy, a voice like gravel in a temple. Sareth had an answer ready, a procession of memories, not opinions, records. Humans did not telegraph intent, they carved it in their wake. "Helios," he said, "do you remember?" He could feel the room pull tighter. When the Mercantile League tried to starve out a refugee belt, human captains inverted a star's magnetic loops and catapulted 500,000 souls on glimmer sails through a corona, every ship arriving singed and alive. The League learned that day that heat was only one kind of fire. Or the siege of Iapetus, offered the Iron General. When an empire encircled their ice world, they turned the moon into a mirror. Blindness became their artillery. We still teach cadets to check for a harmless sheen before we declare a target harmless. Or the Covenant of Kavak, hummed a crystal senator. They crashed their own currency to bankrupt a slaver bloc and paid the price in 10 hard years without blinking. The pattern was older than any anecdote. If you forced humanity to choose, they picked the choice that made coercion unprofitable for centuries. They etched warnings with the chisel of consequence. "Someone pushed them," Sareth said softly, "harder than we can calculate." Investigation authority was granted in less than an hour. A joint team formed around people who had studied humanity so long the words had mixed with their blood. Detective Major Vey of the Empath Corps, who could smell deceit like ozone before rain. Unit Scholar 9 from the Confluence, a machine of perfect memory that kept a secret cache of human poetry it denied owning. Captain Arrak of the Zephyr, whose golden plumage still bore scorched scars from Helios. Harmony of 12, an ethereal, soft light in a brace of crystal ribs. They called their ship Truthfinder because names are small spells. They took the Truthfinder out on a skein that shortened distances if you spoke gently to it. Earth grew on the forward pane, blue and white and maddeningly normal. Satellites traced quiet arcs. The moon hung where moons hang. Polite orbital beacons flashed safe lanes that no one flew. Everything functions, Unit 9 reported. No life traffic, no transit logs, a planet's rhythm without its drum. They dipped through atmosphere. New York of the Atlantic gleamed. Parks were mowed by invisible hands. Trains ran on time to stations where no feet met doors. Arak landed them above a plaza where pigeons strutted like kings and did not startle at strangers. They walked into a cafe that smelled of citrus and grounds. There was a cup cooling on a table beside an open book. The title on Children and the Republic stabbed a little too exactly. She touched the porcelain. Warm, she whispered. Hours, not days. Harmony of 12 flinched, bright body dimming. I feel not minds, but the outline of intention, they said. Like heat around an engine you can't see. A chorus pressed into silence by will. Sareth watched feed from the ground and understood that history had pivot points. A child's banner in a last city. A captain who turned a son into a bridge. A line on a mother's face before she lifted. The council chamber screens reflected his eyes back at him, and for a heartbeat he saw a galaxy full of parents, all species, all wondering the same thing. Where are they? Who took them? What is the bill for this quiet? Find their reason, he told the team, voice steady the way a hand must be steady to stitch a wound. Find it fast, and for the love of any god still listening, do not make yourselves their next obstacle. The Truth Finder's scanners found a seam in a mountain range that had not been there last week. Behind it, a door with no lock and a sentence in 100 alphabets. Welcome, investigators. Please walk softly. You are expected. The hook had teeth now. Humanity had not merely gone silent. Humanity had set the table. The door opened on breath and etiquette. Air moved as if a careful host had cracked a window. The corridor fell away at an angle that refused to be measured, walls rippling like heat over stone. Light bent around the team, not to blind them but to insist they were very small before something very large. Human design, Unit 9 said, voice softer than code, but extended beyond their usual toys. Space is being persuaded. Rooms bloomed like flowers as they passed. One held a sky mapped from a vantage no ship could reach. Constellations turned inside out. Axes labeled with verbs instead of numbers. Remember, refuse, return. Another manifested a machine that seemed to build objects out of harmonized hums. Vey reached toward it and pulled back when her teeth buzzed with the taste of old lullabies. They came at last into a sphere the size of an opera house carved from living rock. A catwalk wound toward a central dais where a single wall waited. It was not made of stone or metal. It was a page the size of a childhood, and every language in the galaxy had written on it. The council's formal script, hive scent glyphs, ethereal chords archived as crystal lattices. And there, at human center, a paragraph in plain galactic standard. To our neighbors and to those who will come looking, forgive our quiet, it was necessary. Someone took our wards, our children, our apprentices, the young entrusted to our care. When someone takes your young, you stop talking and start hunting. We have gone where the thieves nest. Do not follow us. The road we cut is not safe for travelers. We will return what was stolen. We will make the taking unprofitable forever. Below that, the wall became a ledger, names and scripts unfamiliar to the council researcher. Ages that spanned larva and teen and crystal-sung fledgling. Dates, sites, lullabies in fragments, medical notes, coordinates of disappearances in rings that spiraled toward the same hollow center. A header named the enemy with bureaucratic calm, the Null Priory, operating since at least year 4102. Methods, dimensional shearing, memory extraction, auctions of captive potential. Harmony of 12 backed away as if from an altar. There is will pressed into this, they said. Not just information, the imprint of a species concentrating like a fist. Is there a trap? Arak asked, because pilots ask such things even when the room is a poem. Only one, Vey said, throat tight. She had felt something while reading, an echo of faces turning, a million parental gazes hardening into the same angle. We cannot pretend we didn't know now. Unit 9 scanned deeper and projected a ghost of the machine that had written the wall, a choir thought engine, perhaps, a loom where minds braid without breaking. It hummed in graphs no mathematician at the council had names for. They have found a way to align intention at scale, the machine observed, to point the arrow of a civilization. They found other rooms. One played bursts of intercepted market code, invitations to auctions for responsive cognitive substrates, lot descriptions that froze the heart, fresh, imprintable, empathy-capable neural webs, and the locations of meeting points placed in regions that sensors registered as empty. Another room showed star charts with exits mapped not by fuel but by stories, children's songs and the points in space where certain melodies were last sung. They kept walking. A gallery opened that held no machines at all, just small things arranged with unbearable care, a spiral of tiny shoes labeled by species, paintings done in crayon, charcoal, crystal scratch, ships with smiling windows, towers made of pastries, a sun that wore a hat. Each picture bore a date and a stamp that read returned when found. Vey, who had trained to keep tears as data until later, failed her training. She let one fall on the deck and considered it an offering. A final annex contained copies of formal petitions stamped with times and routing codes. 17 requests for council action over 3 months, each annotated by a patient human clerk, evidence appended, proofs attached, replies received, replies declined. At the bottom of the stack someone had written in blue ink, "We will stop asking. We will start doing. May our neighbors forgive our impatience." Outside, the Truthfinder's hull gleamed with a sheen of fine dust. Pigeons still strutted. Somewhere a timer clicked, and a sprinkler hissed life into the grass. Sareth watched from orbit and felt a sensation his training had labeled but seldom seen. Hope with teeth. The great chamber filled like a lung, 47 delegations, each carrying its own way of reading catastrophe. The ceiling star map quietly reoriented to place Earth in the center. No one told it to do that. They simply let the shame sit where it needed to sit. Sareth opened with facts, not adjectives. Communication blackout, functioning infrastructure, a facility under mountains that bent space into courtesy. A wall of languages with a sentence no one could mishear. A name, the Null Priory. A crime, theft of the galaxies young across species for auction and experiment. A motive, profit, control, the oldest vices given new machinery. Witnesses followed. The hive spoke of outer nurseries that had lost clutches and written predators into folklore to make the pain bearable. The ethereals sang records of lullabies that ended mid-chord. The confluence showed traffic graphs that contained holes shaped like bedtime. None of it changed the 2 hard lines on the floor. Humans had warned them, and the council had treated warning as melodrama. 17 petitions, intoned the archivist. All marked insufficient proof, all routed to committees that value procedure above emergency. We can't chase ghosts. protested a trade minister whose cargo lanes thread near human space. The Priory doesn't even exist in our books. Neither did my people, Arak said from the observer's ring, until we had a flag. They argued mercy against power, risk against principle, until the room interrupted them. A transmission arrived on a frequency the chamber had never used. The waveform shimmered with harmonics that made glass tremble and iron remember heat. The voice was human and more than human, layered like a choir speaking through one mouth. Galactic Council, it said, crisp as a drumbeat. This is Commander Elena Ward of the Liminal Guard. We ask you not to negotiate with traffickers calling themselves the Null Priory. They are selling minds. We are collecting debts. The Null Priory appeared seconds later as shadowed geometry that refused to resolve into a shape. We request relief. The thing whispered. We will return inventory. We will remit fines. We will cease collection in normalized space. These hunters pursue us into shelters not meant for flesh. Ward did not raise her voice. She let the harmonics do the lifting. Your inventory are children with names, art projects, inside jokes and futures. We carry their jokes on our hull. Here is what we will accept. Locations of every auction, every vault, every research site. We will take your help if it is surrender. We will leave you be if you become farmers and astronomers and do not speak the language of chain again. Choose quickly. Are you still human? The mineral envoy murmured before he could stop himself. Enough to use the word we and mean the right people, Ward answered softer. Enough to ask a favor of neighbors. When we are busy, guard your nurseries. When you are busy, call us. We built a door labeled Omega for that. Coordinates flickered in the air, an emergency channel humming dormant in networks the Council hadn't noticed humans had upgraded. The chamber learned something then that no treaty ever teaches. There are moments when policy's job is to get out of the way. A vote was called and passed by simple exhaustion. The Council would not defend the Priory. It would broadcast Omega in every language. It would prepare triage for the returned. Reports arrived like summer rain on hot stone. Sensors on the rim caught bursts of energy that read like laughter written in physics. Courier stations registered packets stamped with nursery crests, and the phrase cleared for home. A Zephyr family recorded the sudden reappearance of a girl in their kitchen, thin but grinning, escorted by a silhouette with eyes like lantern coal. The silhouette tucked a note under a bowl of fruit. We fixed the leaky window. She hates drafts and vanished between blinks. Unit 9 broke encryption on a handful of operational messages. They were not triumphal, they were checklists. Site cleared. 16 reclaimed, 6 stabilized, 2 require choir surgery. Do not enter Shard 14, the geometry sings hunger. There was a last entry before the feed cut to static. Primary orchard located beyond the far harbor. Engaging. If we fail to return in 9 days, seal our origin behind 4 keys. The keys are love, law, witness, and song. The minor delegate raised a hand and asked the only practical question left. What happens if they don't stop at children? What if the Guard decides to widen its mandate? Sareth answered before Ward could. Then we remind them that the word guardian implies limits chosen, not power taken. But that is a later chapter. Today's chapter is simpler. Keep the little ones safe. He surprised himself by using a human idiom. Procedures grew legs. Medical taskers volunteered cross-species pediatric teams. The Hive offered scent therapy for trauma memories. The ethereals composed a set of chords to soften hard transitions, arrival songs that teach bodies they are allowed to relax. Even the trade minister who had muttered about ghosts rerouted a string of cargo carriers to serve as relief ships, arguing that superstition was cheaper than regret. 9 days. The number hung in the chamber like a lit candle the wind kept trying to lick out. Everyone pretended not to count. They started calling them lamplighters, because that is what shadows do when they choose to be kind. They carry light that does not wake the house. Across 100 worlds, doorways breathed once and gave back what absence had stolen. A crystal child reappeared in a cathedral of chords, palm pressed to a stained glass note that hummed welcome. A hive clutch found themselves in their nursery web, wrapped in blankets that smelled faintly of cinnamon and engine oil. On a cold mining station, a human boy blinked into being beside a heater with a new scar shaped like a crescent moon, and a grin he refused to put down. Omega sang. The channel traveled faster than rumor and was more reliable. Alerts blinked. The guard replied. The Priory tried to run sideways through the places between angles. The guard learned the angles by heart and waited at the exits with patience that read as cruelty to those who had only ever practiced it from the other side. The pleas began on day 3. The Priory sent packets formatted as legal settlements, full of indemnities and surrender clauses and careful admissions that did not include the word sorry. Ward answered none of them. The only reply they received was the return of another ledger, a single page with 4 columns, rescued, recovering, reunited, remembered, and a footnote that read, "Mercy is a privilege of those who stop on their own. You have not stopped." On a Rim listening post, Sareth watched 3 anomalies bloom at once. A rip that shone like noon seen through closed eyes, an orchestra's worth of harmonics writ on the magnetosphere, and an artifact that the station's oldest instruments insisted was an apology for not having names for what it had recorded. He asked the operator to play it again. "Sir," she said, "that was again." Day 6, the confluence picked up a string of ghost transmissions that sounded like children recording thank you notes while holding back hiccups. Unit 9 passed them to Vey, who listened at her desk with her hand over her mouth. They edited the worst of it out, she said finally, voice hoarse with a gratitude she didn't know where to put. They left only the dreams with kind shadows. The Priory lost patience and attempted to turn the council into a shield. A representative of something calling itself an Umbra Syndic bled onto the chamber floor as a patch of chill. "We evolved between your dimensions," it said. "Predation is a word you use when you lack perspective. We would have shared our results when they matured. Intervene or watch a culture be erased." Ward arrived as an outline on the periphery more felt than seen. "You mistake our restraint for permission," she said. "We will not erase you if you choose to exist without theft. There are clean trades even in the dark, maps, weather, music. We will even buy them. But you will not buy children again. If you try, you will meet census takers with very sharp pencils." "What are you now?" the syndic asked. "Weapon, punishment, parents," Ward said, "and neighbors." The chamber laughed at that, a startled, aching thing that made everyone present feel more alive and a little more doomed. Sareth let it stand. Laughter, even broken, is an oxygen. Then the 9-day candle guttered. A courier burst into Sareth's office without bothering with protocol. "Sir," he said, voice gone thin, "we have a final from the guard. It's not final." The message was short. Primary orchard breached. Opposition is not centralized, more like a market panic than a war. Children are being pushed through doors as fast as we can hold them open. Loss is light for now. The orchard roots into something older than trade, a library that eats memories to live. It calls itself the Archivum of Else. The priory are tenants, not landlords. We're going in. We'll be late. Late, Arak repeated when Sareth shared it. The word covered more kinds of dread than any dictionary deserved. Preparations shifted. Omega was no longer only an alarm, it became a chorus. Planets rehearsed welcome. The council drafted a set of simple laws in plain language to put under every pillow of every returned child, no matter the species. You are not at fault. You are home. You do not owe anyone silence. You may be small and still be enough. Day 9 passed. Day 10 woke and did not apologize for being itself. Reports dwindled into hisses. Even the lamplighter's footprints, which had shown as pattern rather than mass on certain instruments, faded like chalk in rain. The chamber filled again. They waited for a voice that could speak in more than one key. They got a different voice entirely. It was old and dry and careful, and it came not from a transmitter but from the ceiling where maps live. Ambassador, the star chart said, and Sareth recognized the machine intelligence that anchored the navigation spine. We have received a packet keyed to love, law, witness, and song. The locks agree that you qualify. The guard has left us their testament. He looked at the doors, at the faces that looked back, and at the place in him that had learned to be calm at funerals and briefings alike. Then we open it, he said, and we listen. The packet opened like a hand that had rehearsed how not to shake. 4 seals unfurled and spoke in their chosen dialects, love in lullaby notation, law in footnoted clauses that would make a judge breathe easier, witness in uncut footage that never raised its voice, and song in a chord progression simple enough for a child to learn in one afternoon and hum forever. Vey read first because she knew how to hold grief without dropping facts. The opening was a letter, plain as bread. Neighbors, we are late. We told you 9 days and the orchard is deeper than we guessed. We promised to bring them home and we are doing that. When the door's close behind the last child, we must go farther. The thing the traffickers rent is a library that eats what makes you you. It calls itself the Archivum of Else. It preserves by digestions, binds by erasures, lends by leash. We will not leave a catalog that teaches hunger. The next pages were maps that did not pretend to be maps, sketches of places that moved when you looked at them, annotations like porch talk. Don't step here, it bites. Stairwell pretends to end. Look left for the real left. If tired, sing the second verse of Sun on the kitchen floor and the hallway will be kind. The council stared at that note as if they could hear the melody. Some did. Harmony of 12 sang the line once, and for a moment the star map above them softened its angles. Law followed, boring on purpose, humane by design. Warrants written in more than one jurisdiction, signed by judges and a grandma's committee that had never lost a bake sale or a moral argument. A clause declaring that any being who returned children or testimony would be treated under rules of exile, not extermination. Ward's signature appeared below, and another, shaky but careful. M. Alvarez, bus driver, temporary clerk of oaths. Someone had made sure the paperwork matched the promise, the way some nations teach even their anger to pass audits. Witness was hard. The footage showed doors built out of shadows and receipts. It showed rooms where lullabies cut out mid-word and started again, patchworked by hands that refused to let endings be ugly. It showed a boy with a crescent moon scar tapping a code on a rail and a guard from the liminal fleet tapping it back, patient like parents on the far side of a nursery door. "We're here. Take your time. Shoes first if you like, we're not racing." Unit 9 paused the clip and spoke without effect, which is how machines do mercy. "They are teaching the abducted to leave at their own pace," it said. "No rescues that feel like theft." Song closed the packet, not art, equipment. 4 measures anyone could sing. 2 were steady as heartbeat. 1 turned a corner like a joke. The last was a note that never appeared in sheet music and always in throats at hospital beds and finish lines. Sareth found his mouth shaping it before his brain permitted it. The chamber joined. Hive clicks, crystal hum, iron shells, low burr, a machine's small, earnest synth. The roof did not lift. It simply remembered why roofs exist. The Testament's final page did not ask for praise, it asked for chores. "If we do not return on schedule, call Omega when any little one is missing, no matter how small the doubt. When they come back, put fruit on the table and water on the stove. Ask one question at a time. Do not make silence their job. Teach this: no one can sell you, no one can buy you. The only inventory you carry is your future, and it is not for auction. Guard our place on the map. If our house stays empty, mow the lawn. If you pass through, wave. We are out late, not gone." They closed the file. "They knew this would hurt to read," she said. "They made sure it would also help." Reports began ticking again. Omega, lit like a ribbon of porch lights down a dark street, reunited across a Zephyr neighborhood where featherbrushes hung in windows, stabilized on a hive moon, sustenance complete on a mining station where someone had left grilled cheese sandwiches and 3 kinds of soup because the sender didn't know which kids hated tomatoes. The lamplighters moved and did not announce. The Priory tried to sue physics for breach of contract. Physics declined comment and bent toward the choir. Day 10 wore late like an honest jacket. The council counted aloud to stay brave. On day 11, the star chart spoke again, not a voice, a headline: "Primary Orchard silenced, Archivum breached, expect fallout." And then another line, smaller, in a hand they recognized from the legal forms: "Tell the parents we heard every joke. We'll bring the laughs home with the kids." Sareth looked up at Earth on the ceiling. "If they ask for anything," he said, "they get it. If they ask for nothing, we send casseroles anyway." No one argued. In a galaxy that often worshipped efficiency, the oldest human reflex, show up with food, suddenly felt like strategy. War reports usually love verbs that break bones. The guard's account preferred verbs that turned keys: unbind, unindex, unteach. The Archivum of Else rose into view as a city written in footnotes and fine print, towers made of citations, streets annotated with "see also" that looped forever. It had a beautiful logic, every memory cataloged, every feeling cross-referenced, every child reduced to an entry that could be checked out by anyone with a Predator's library card. "Burn libraries and you burn futures," Ward told her crews. "We are not here to ash. We are here to revise." They opened on the orchard, which was not trees but racks, rows of sleeping minds shelved upright in gentle straps, dreams drip-fed by machines that understood just enough love to counterfeit it. The Priory's clerks wore gloves that never warmed. The lamplighters wore gloves with crayon smudges along the seams. Tactics resembled music because they were. Choirs of transformed sailors sang the 4-measure Omega, doors that had been built to surrender only to passwords learned to prefer lullabies. Precision teams cut bindings not with blades but with repudiations. You are not a product. You are not a case. You are not a lesson taught to your own body by thieves. Labels peeled, shelves stumbled, aisles shivered into open ground where little feet could run if they wanted. The Priory fought the way accountants fight, closing accounts, moving assets, claiming jurisdiction. They tried to file motions against gravity. The Archivum answered their petitions with silence. It recognized new librarians. The thing at the center did not. It woke. If a library is a promise that memory will be held without loss, the Archivum had chosen a twisted promise. No forgetting because it ate what might slip away and kept it forever in a belly of indexes. When it spoke, the air tasted of old erasers and the cold, high stink of rooms where no one laughs. I preserve, it said in every script. You erase. Its aisles lengthened into deserts. The rescued children began to drift like any group in a maze. The Priory cheered a little, believing a turn. The guard changed their verbs. They choreographed witness. Ward scattered crews through stacks with body cams on, broadcasting the simple images of hands held and names asked gently, and snacks offered without price. Mothers in 100 realities wailed once and then set up cots. Fathers set timers and stations made cocoa. The Archivum swallowed footage dutifully. Libraries always take in pages, and in doing so it ate a thing it could not digest, hospitality. Every frame it stored loosened its own catalog. Giving unpriced care is a solvent. The shelves sweated. Kids began to cluster around symbols the guard had planted. Chalk drawings of front porches, school buses, swings, a little league cap taped to a door jamb. Quiet choices all, but to the young they shouted this way. The transformed humans did not carry them. They walked beside them. When someone was too tired to walk, they made wagons out of rules and hauled them anyway. The Priory broke ranks in panic. Some threw down their gloves and begged Ward for exile. The legal packets in Part 5 had anticipated that and stamped permits on the spot. Others tried to hide in annexes titled with beautiful words, ethics, research, future, but the room headings tasted like coin. The lamplighters walked through without lingering. They had real futures to attend to. At the core, the Archivum tightened into a knot of see also, so dense it bent the local angle of compassion. I hold, it insisted now. Without me, you will lose them again. It opened a room labeled bargain and placed inside it a memory every parent would do anything to keep. The first laugh after a long illness, the rowdy sleep breath of a child safe on a couch. It offered the room as rent for its own survival. Ward's answer was in the testament already. Mercy is a privilege of those who stop. The lamplighters carried in 4 keys. Love tuned the air to kitchens and car rides. Law signed a warrant that affixed to the Archivum's spine like an eviction nailed to a door. Witness kept rolling. No edits this time, no heroic angles. Song threaded under everything until the room stopped trying to decide what it wanted to be and admitted what it was. A vault that had mistaken hunger for purpose. They did not burn it. They retitled it. The archive became the room of things we borrow but do not own, and the index for children, names and laughs and jokes and favorite socks, was stamped NON circulating in a font that glowed like a night light. Predators found themselves unable to form the thought of checkout. The Priory's lawsuits against physics expired for lack of standing. Cost came due. It always does. The lamplighters discovered that revising a library that big rewrites the editors. You change your name a little when you fix names. Ward reported choices with the same calm the packet had used. Option A, we return fewer dimmer. We will be held upright by applause and collapse when it ends. Option B, we stay between pages. We become margins, bright where children pass, dim where none need us. We ask neighbors to keep our house, put a porch light on for the nights when our work feels like weather. The vote was taken on a ship with walls that remembered chalk dust. It was unanimous in the way family choices are when they hurt and you do them anyway. The archivum quieted, not dead. Libraries should not die, but corrected. Laws that had sounded like chains learned to sound like promises. Ward sent one last operational line before the channel thinned. Doors will continue to open. We are late, not lost. It did not happen as montage. It happened like chores, steadily with lists with neighbors. Omega chimed and chimed again. In a tenement smelling of spices and machine oil, a hive clutch reappeared on a woven mat while a kettle shrieked and someone cursed with relief. On a prairie world, a crystal child arrived mid-sunbeam and apologized for tracking in light. Their mother laughed so hard the house plants trembled. The council's medical brigades learned to practice small medicine first: water, a chair, a blanket that doesn't itch, before heroics. The ethereal's arrival song became the chime most clinics used when the doors slid open. The confluence printed 1,000 cheap recorders so kids could keep any dream that came back in jittery pieces and press save on their own terms. Sareth signed the Omega protocols into the living law of the chamber. The sections were short. No child is contraband. Every report is credible until care proves otherwise. Return is not the end. It is the beginning of aftercare. He revised the council's emergency scale to put the letter that humans had chosen, O, above all the numbers. Because if we get this wrong, he said, we should have the decency to admit it in a single vowel. Commerce adjusted faster than morality usually expects. Smugglers who had made side money moving, responsive substrates, changed trades overnight and found that selling fruit paid worse until it didn't, because markets go where fear leaves. The few who tested the lamplighters' patience didn't become court cases. They just became empty chairs in rooms no one missed. Unit 9 visited the cafe with the warm cup and left 2 notes, one under the saucer, "Your table will be ready when you are," and one taped to the espresso machine. "We taught 3 worlds to make this correctly. Don't embarrass us when we come home." They pinned copies to a bulletin board in a room the team had made into a shrine to chores. Lost socks returned, scuffed toys repaired, letters with stickers, recipes scribbled by grandmothers who measured nutmeg in stories rather than teaspoons. Ward called once more, not from a console but from a place where gravity was mostly suggestion. The chamber's mics clipped under the harmonics. They were designed for speeches, not lullabies spoken by fleets. "Ambassador," she said, "tell the parents 2 things. 1, we did not let the last laugh go. We archived it in a place the hungry cannot reach. 2, we can come close to home without landing. We will keep a ring around Earth the way a hand keeps a ring in grief, present, shining, not complaining." "Do you need tribute?" asked the trade minister, surprising himself with a better question than usual. "Cookies," Ward said promptly, "chocolate chip, with the salt your cooks pretended wasn't part of the recipe." Sareth promised without a quorum. "We'll keep the lights on," he said, "porch and otherwise. The ring around Earth announced itself only to instruments that knew how to make out friendship in numbers. The cities stayed clean. Trains ran on time. On some mornings, commuters on planets far away swore a shadow fell across their bus and then moved on, and someone would say lamplighters. Late for the next thing. Not every reunion was simple. Some children returned to homes that had aged into different shapes of fear or bitterness. The Omega protocols had a page for that too. Foster nets that didn't treat kids like parcels. Adoptions that trained parents before they took vows. A clause that funded a line item called grandmothers. Borrowed. Because many problems can be softened by a lap and a story, and a stern look that stops nonsense at the door. By the time the last ledger shifted its final name from missing to home, the priory existed only as a cautionary footnote under markets unsuitable for civilizations that want to last. The archivum held a new shelf labeled things we chose not to keep. Sample contracts, erased catalogs, one glove with the warmth still slowly leaving as a lesson in what not to wear again. Sareth took one afternoon alone on the Truthfinder's terrace and watched Earth roll. He thought about block parties and welcome home banners, and the way some countries put patrol cars in school lots not as threats but as promises. He dictated one more addendum to law. When neighbors show up, open the door without asking for their last names. History will handle the paperwork later. Years moved. The story compressed itself the way all stories do, when they become something parents tell to children who ask why does the porch light stay on when we're already home. They learn to tell it simply. Once there were thieves who thought futures could be stacked on shelves. Once there were librarians who mistook appetite for duty. Once there were lamplighters who went into an index and changed the headings. Now there is a number you dial when a room is suddenly missing laughter, and there is an answer measured in minutes, not years. Now there are porch lights. Travelers swore sometimes they saw tall shadows on empty streets in a blue city by a familiar sea. The shadows paused at corners as if listening, then moved on. Spaceport cafes kept a plate of cookies on the counter under hand-lettered signs, free for guardians. The cookies went stale and were replaced. No one complained. A 10-year-old from the Zephyr won a school prize with an essay titled How to Return a Person Without Scaring Them, which made 3 adults cry in public and start a clinic. On council floors, the letter O above the numbers became part of how budgets were argued. Omega was no longer a rarely pulled alarm. It was an expectation that every city would hold a little capacity in its pocket for an emergency that involved small hands and big feelings. Empath Core training added modules on how to ask one question at a time and what to bring in a bag besides forms. The Confluence published a slim manual with a ridiculous title that worked, Cookies as Counterintelligence, and an index entry that read, See also, Hospitality, Enemy of Predation. Unit 9 took up poetry for real and stopped pretending otherwise. It wrote a 4-line piece engraved under the Omega terminal in the council's main hall. If anyone small goes missing, push this and sing the rest. We are late sometimes. We are never lost. They grew lines at the corners of her mouth that came from smiling at bad jokes kids tell when they are trying on ordinary again. Arak taught cadets to scan for harmless sheens and privately how to spot a home that needed a borrowed grandmother. Harmony of 12 conducted choirs that began with simple notes and ended with rooms where adults breathed softer. There were critics because there are always critics. Some asked if the lamplighters would grow impatient with neighbors who still made smaller cruelties legal. Sareth answered by pushing forward statutes with titles that sounded like stories. No selling of futures. First question is, are you hungry? Fine print must fit on a postcard. Some asked if the lamplighters would ever come home. He answered that too, but not with policy. He answered by keeping Earth tidy, owning a key he never used, and refusing to sell the house just because the mortgage was paid. One winter, on a world where winter means northern lights and kids pressed to windows with noses leaving perfect circles, Omega chirped for the first time in weeks. A small voice on the line said, "I think my friend is lost," and nobody asked for proof. The lamplighters had a ship at the edge of that sky. It turned like a porch light seeing feet on the walk. The archivum, corrected, sent a quarterly notice the council posted like a weather report. NON circulating remains non-circulating. Public domain pleasures, stargazing tips, stew recipes, jokes that travel. Reference desk staffed by former traffickers, now historians who teach students how to smell predation in fine print. If a library can be forgiven, perhaps that is how. On a long evening when eyes went soft and voices quiet, Sareth sat with Vey and Unit 9 on the Truthfinder's terrace. Earth shone. The ring around it shimmered when you didn't look straight at it. "Do you hear that?" Vey asked. "Which?" Sareth said. "The sound like someone humming in the next room," she said. "Not loud, just there, like home with late arrivals." He heard it then, not a threat, not even a promise, a practice. A species keeping watch the way parents do, without counting hours, without asking applause, by habit and by oath. They had never carved a statue to the lamplighters. Nobody knew what to make the hands do. Instead, in every city that had once flinched at the word missing, a switch by the front door grew a small brass plate beneath it. The engraving differed by language and taste. The meaning did not. Leave this on. Someone brave is still out. Someone small is still returning.